Welcome to the latest edition of our Risk and Focus series. I'm Chad Hemingway, Senior Editor of National Underwriter Property and Casualty. Today we're at Two Roads Brewing Company in Stratford, Connecticut to learn about the insurance risks at craft breweries.
I've been specializing in insuring craft breweries since the mid-1980s. A brew pub actually opened up a few blocks from my office in 1986, and I got friendly with the people, and I really got very intrigued by what they were doing. And I asked them if there was an association that represented breweries, and they said there was, and I contacted them, and they loved the idea of me starting a special insurance program.
He has a great reputation in the beer business, and my partner Peter During met up with him, and that started a relationship with Peter, and we knew right away he was the right guy.
We took it right through the builder's risk period, because there's a lot of construction that went on. It's an old building, it's over 100 years old.
Our objective in Connecticut was to revitalize an old brick manufacturing building. Finding buildings for breweries is very difficult because of the equipment requirements and the manufacturing flow. We shared those plans with Peter, and he gave us some good advice to make some minor adjustments to make sure we're going to be in good shape when it comes time to get insurance.
I certainly was aware of a lot of hazards. The floors were made out of wood bricks, they were all uneven, their sprinkler systems were basically defunct. There's a lot of construction going on, and I knew that that would bring its own hazards, so it required some very special insurance products. We do the workers' comp, the property, the general liability, the liquor liability, the auto, the bonding. You've got a lot of hot materials. So you want to make sure they have the proper footwear, the proper pants. There can be splashbacks of cleaning agents, the caustics. You want to make sure they have the proper eyewear. If they've got a bottling machine, you might want them to be wearing earplugs because it can get pretty noisy. There's a big exposure to CO2. When sometimes if they don't have a cleaning in place system, which is a ball that sprays around inside and with the caustic soda and cleans the tanks, oftentimes, even if they do have that, there will be times when people have to climb into these vessels. And these vessels have a lot of CO2. So you have to have very sophisticated lockout, tagout programs. You've got to make sure there's always someone working with them so that somebody's just not left in a vessel by themselves, because if things don't go right, they could pass out. It could be a fatality.
That's been a key component of our early going, is to bring in people with a lot of experience on this type of equipment. We're bringing in the right people to train all the employees in the right way to handle this equipment, because the equipment is very high risk.
Our program will cover you for spoilage if the equipment goes down, or if something went wrong in the brewing process.
We had a little scare already with that snowstorm in October. If it had gone another 6 or 7 hours, we would have had to throw out some batches. And we were on the phone with Peter discussing how to manage that if it happens. He was very proactive in calling us. Business interruption is an absolutely key component to this. The name Two Roads has all to do with the Robert Frost poem, The Road Less Taken. Two Roads has a lot to do with our business model. Half the business model is to build a much larger brewery than you need for a startup and fill up a lot of that capacity with contract brewing for other craft brewers. And then, of course, the other half is to do our own proprietary lineup of brands called Two Roads.
They're producing other people's products, so you have to make sure that the contracts they have with the breweries whose beer they'll be producing, that they have their own insurance as well. Some crazy things can happen with the product once it leaves the facility. Somebody might be drinking your beer and they go out and get into a car accident. You will be named in the lawsuit. They think that they could never be held responsible. They have the brand, and Two Roads is just doing the brewing. You're putting a lot of materials into the sewer system. So depending on where you are, it can get pretty sticky. Some towns will require you to have pretty sophisticated filtration systems. And then there's the issues of the spent grain. What do you do with that? Because if that's not handled properly, that can get pretty rancid quickly. What happens more often than not is they have a contract with a local farmer, because it makes great filler for the feeds for the cows and the pigs. That also brings its own risk, because you want to make sure that once it leaves the brewery, you're not being held responsible, because if the farmers don't handle it properly, then it gets contaminated, and then some of the animals are affected. Well, it can go on and on.
The craft beer segment is growing very rapidly, 11, 12, 13%. Right now there are about 900 breweries in planning, according to the Brewers Association, meaning 900 people have registered, they have intended to build a brewery.
There certainly are more carriers now than there were 5 or 10 years ago. When I first got into it, the insurance industry didn't feel comfortable with it because they weren't too familiar with it. They've been around long enough now. The insurance industry realized breweries are around to stay, so many more are offering the coverage.
Insurance for everything, the public, the operations. It is such an important part about this, and if you go to the Brewers Association, there's a huge amount of information that they provide all about insurance. That's how important it is.
So there's one particular beer here that catches our eye, and that's the workers' comp beer. How did that get its name?
So workers' comp, we started thinking about it because the Saison, which is a Belgian farmhouse ale, these were beers made in small Belgian farmhouses, and migrant workers would come every year to help cut the grain on these farms, and the workers during the day would be fortified by beer, because water was usually contaminated, and this is why beer was a big beverage back in the day, because it wasn't contaminated. You know, it didn't have bacteria in it because of the alcohol. So the farm workers in Belgium would get 9 liters a day to drink and sustain themselves and compensate them in the end of the day also for a hard day's work. Hence, workers' comp. And we thought it'd be fun to name our Saison, the Belgian farmhouse ale, workers' comp.
Right.